Sunday, after 11 hours of talks, EU authorities announced that a stabilisation fund had been agreed between EU finance ministers, central bankers and the International Monetary Fund to prevent a Greek meltdown. The fund consists of 60 billion euros of support financed by EU bonds and 440 billion euros of loan guarantees from the euro area. That sum would be supplemented by a further 220 billion euro or more from the IMF. This is the biggest bailout since, well, the last biggest one was the collapse of Lehman Brothers in 2008. But will it be enough to solve this crisis and stop it from spreading to other euro members? Well, joining me now from Singapore is our investment guru and the world's Jim Rogers, founder of the Rogers International Commodity Index. He's here with us now, and let me ask you straight away, what does this new plan mean, short-term, medium-term, long-term, to the euro?
Well, David, I was startled, I was stunned when I read that, because this is a signal to me that they're giving up on the euro. They don't care whether the euro is a sound currency or not. They're saying to the member states, spend the money. Somebody will bail you out. Run up big debts. Don't worry. Everything will be okay. As far as I'm concerned, it's more corrosion of the euro from within.
Corrosion from within. What should they have done?
Well, if I were doing it, I would have let Greece go bankrupt. Greece is 2% of the European economy. It would have been painful for the Greeks and for a few people for a while, but it wouldn't have been the end of the world. Then the Greeks would have realized, well, we've got to shape up. We've got to solve our problems. More importantly, all the other countries in Europe would have realized, well, we got to shape up too. We have to solve our economic problems. We cannot continue to spend money we don't have. We cannot continue to float bonds to people, to suckers, so that we don't have to worry about our future. No, I would have let them go bankrupt. It would have been a difficult year or two, or maybe more for the Greeks, but the rest of the world would have been better off.
And in terms of when that situation happens, if it ever did happen, what exactly happens to everybody? If Greece went bankrupt, what would happen to its companies? What would happen to its banks? What would happen to its individuals who's got some cash in the bank and so on? Does everybody lose everything?
No, no, no. Very little would have happened to the individuals. Very little would have happened to the companies. Everybody would have continued. The Greek government would have had to cut back on its spending dramatically. Some parts of the Greek economy would perhaps have suffered. I mean, if you're doing business with the Greek government has to cut back. Obviously, you're going to suffer for a while. But people have been living high on the hog in Greece for years, as you know, David, and those people would have had to cut back. Other people would have been better off because they would have realized, oh, okay, now our costs are coming down and we'll be able to do better things. Some bankers would have lost money. The reason that they did what they did, the bankers called up the politicians and said, save us, save us. We own a lot of Greek bonds. That's not the way it's supposed to work, David. When people go bankrupt, they're supposed to go bankrupt. This is, David, this is welfare for the rich. This is socialism for the rich.
Right, and what are the risks for Greece now for accepting this plan, and what would have been the risks for Greece if they hadn't accepted the plan?
Well, if they hadn't accepted the plan, they would have been forced to go bankrupt because nobody would help them pay their bills. They would have had to reorganize. David, countries have been going bankrupt for a few thousand years. There's nothing new about this. It happens not all the time, but it happens with some regularity. Countries reorganize. They go to their creditors. They say, we can only pay you so much. The creditors suffer. It was the banks who they would go to who own their bonds. They would suffer, but then Greece would reorganize and start over. What's going to happen now, David, is 3 years from now, 5 years from now, 8 years from now, as these debts get bigger and bigger, and it's not just Greece, it's other countries in Europe too, then you have the demise of the euro because the debts get so big that at some point people just say, we're not going to give you any more money. This ensures that that day is going to come.
Jim, thank you very much for your update on the world situation. We'll be back to you again in a few weeks' time. Thanks for everything. And that's all I'm afraid we've got time for this week. Doesn't time fly when you're enjoying yourself? Join me again in 7 days' time for another Frost Over the World.